Coming up on the Sports Reporters.
Icarus, he flew too close to the sun. I mean, there's a mixing my mythologies and metaphors here, but there's a Shakespearean element of a man who was sort of blinded by his flaws.
Today on the Sports Reporters, the continuing crisis at FIFA in the wake of Gianni Infantino's plan, now withdrawn, to spin off the commercial arm of the organization and sell a percentage of that entity, which would own the rights or would have owned the rights to FIFA events. Now Gianni Infantino's leadership is under attack from several sides, including UEFA, his previous employer, where he served as Secretary General under Michel Platini. To discuss this ongoing crisis in global soccer, we are joined by three global soccer experts: ESPN's Gab Marcotti, Henry Winter of the Football Boardroom, and Joshua Robinson, the sports editor of the Wall Street Journal. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us here on the Sports Reporters. This is the story that refuses to die, the controversy surrounding Infantino after that ill-fated attempt to create this separate entity and spin it off, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start with you, Joshua. Right now, what is the latest as we speak? It is Monday afternoon, 12:47 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What's the latest?
Well, Monday morning, we got a letter, a joint open letter from the heads of UEFA, CONCACAF, and the AFC. So that's the Asian Federation, Europe, and North Central America and the Caribbean. And all of them, this is the strongest thing they've said so far, have come out and said that clearly this could not be an organization. World football could not be led by the whims of one man and needed systemic change. And this is now the battle lines have been drawn. We have this kind of fragile opposition that is in place, and they've decided they're going to be the ones to take on Gianni Infantino. Now, we know that that opposition is not completely unified. This is not all of Europe and not all of North and Central America. For instance, Mexico is one big outlier that was not a signatory to this letter. We also know that Gianni Infantino has been picking off federations in Asia that continue to support him. But this is what it looks like right now. And they hope that they can push Gianni towards resignation. But I think, and I'm keen to hear what you guys think, but I don't think that Infantino has in his plans to resign at all anytime soon.
Henry.
I think he goes. I think the statement is so strong, and it's not simply that the statement and the show of unanimity. And I take Joshua's point about the fact that it's not 100% that all the member associations, the 136 member associations that form those three confederations, will absolutely turn against him when the vote is made. But 136, even if it's 120 of them, and Europe and its 55 will be pretty strong. There might be a couple who remain loyal to him privately, but they only need 211. The numbers are counting up. But what is also incredibly significant, and we have to remember the human element in this, is that there are 504 young female footballers who are training all over Europe and preparing for the September the 5th start of the FIFA Women's Under-20 World Cup. And while everyone's arguing about it, they are training, but they don't know, and particularly the 6 European nations of the 24 who are competing in Poland, by the way, they don't know whether it's definitely going ahead. And at the moment, it could easily be pulled. But the word is, and the understanding is, particularly around UEFA, is that there will be breakaway tournaments, that they will set up other organizations and events so that effectively there will be another, almost a second World Cup for these players. So you have this crazy situation of in civil war, and you've got these young women who are preparing, making sacrifices. They're English players. Some of them are at Stanford University, some of them are at English clubs, Scottish clubs. This is the high point of their career. So far, their young careers, and we hope they go on to senior World Cups. And that is being put on the line by the intransigence and the lack of protocol process and this ridiculous plan of one individual. And just testing the water, particularly in Europe, UEFA, where I am in England, they're not for turning. They are not going to stop until Infantino goes. So if you want to get these tournaments on, you're only going to do it when Infantino goes.
Gab?
Look, I think we can get very inside baseball here. I'm going to try to avoid doing that. I think people need to understand where Infantino's power base lies and why FIFA function the way they do. And it's very simple. Some of us, especially in Europe, from wealthier countries, we love to lecture the rest of the world. The reality is there are 211 FIFA member nations, and maybe 70% of them, they wouldn't have a women's team. They wouldn't have youth teams. They wouldn't have any of this stuff without the money that they get from FIFA. That's just the reality of it. It's just not sustainable. All these women's tournaments, the youth tournaments, they all lose money. Every single one of them. Even the Club World Cup loses money. That's a men's club competition. So all of this is funded by the FIFA World Cup. The reason Infantino is so popular is that these people vote for him, is that he makes a lot of money through the World Cup, and he distributes the money to these federations who then can run their power bases. And the fact of the matter is, because every federation, it's not as bad as it was under the previous regime, but every federation, kind of has one vote, whether you're a wealthy country like Liechtenstein with 30,000 inhabitants, you get the same amount of money as Pakistan with, hundreds and hundreds of millions. That's just the way this supposedly, you can call it democracy, you can call it not democracy if you like, but that's why these people vote for him. I agree with Henry. I think, the dissidents, if you want to call them that, are in a very strong position. And they're in a strong position for two reasons. One is Johnny's plan to sell 20% and whatever. We all know what the plan is. It was just a stupid plan. It makes no business sense whatsoever unless you want to try and make a deal with somebody who you think might be personally expedient to make a deal with. It doesn't make sense because if you have a business, the reason you bring in outside investors is there's two reasons. Either you don't have the cash and you need money to grow and scale your business. Cash is not a problem for FIFA. They have 2.7 billion in reserves. They've got massive credit lines around the world. They have a super high credit rating. They could easily borrow money if they felt they needed to spend more money to grow the game. Or you do it because you need strategic partners. Well, you need a strategic partner. I'm sorry, Josh Kushner is not a strategic partner. He's a guy who invests in AI. He's a guy who invests in this and that. Maybe if they bought a media company or a company that builds stadiums or something, you might have a point. So it's neither of those two things. So it was flawed from the start. And I think that's very easy to make that argument, leaving aside the processes and selling the game, the people's game, and all this other stuff, which is important, but doesn't always resonate with the money men. And the other reason is UEFA and CONMEBOL and AFC can go to these countries and say, hey, guess what? You guys got a lot of money from FIFA when Infantino was in charge. You're going to get a lot of money from us because the World Cup is a money spinner, because we've seen that it's worth our time to go and have women's football and youth football. And we're going to continue giving out the same amount of money, and you'll still be in charge. So that, I think, is where Infantino's weakest. He's also very weak in that a lot of people within FIFA, further down, the rank and file employees, are fed up with him, which also doesn't help. But I agree with Henry. He's not in a strong position at all.
There's a totting up process here, and I think he was on fairly thin ice anyway. If you go back a year, parachuting Lionel Messi into Miami, into the Club World Cup, what was that all about? Well, we know what it was about. It was about ratings, but where was the sporting justification for that? Cristiano Ronaldo having his 2 games, which he would have served at the start of the group stage for Portugal of the World Cup, they disappeared. The Balogun affair, I don't need to tell you about that, the hydration breaks, and then on top of it, this plan as well. So, I mean, look, if you're looking for a red card or a second yellow, there were quite a few cases where totting up could actually transpire, and off he goes.
For sure. And I agree with you that sort of the dissidents are in a strong position, come next March. But I think the hope from them is that they can sort of provoke something sooner. And I think that was certainly behind some of the leaks we've seen about Infantino's personal life over the past week. And the one thing that for me, the dissidents are missing, as they sort of prepare for to dig in their heels over the next 8 months, is a credible candidate. And it's surprising to me that they haven't named one yet, or that they haven't sort of coalesced around someone to be, hey, this is our guy. This is who's going to take down Infantino, and this person will fix football.
I think that is a specific part of the strategy. You see this when they have to elect a new pope, right? You don't want the guy's name to come out too soon because everybody goes and finds fault with him, and then they come out with somebody else, him or her. Well, it's always a him with the pope, but FIFA president could be her too. Who knows? So I think what they want to do is they want to clear Gianni out of the way, get an interim president to take them through to the elections, and then kind of have a slate. I don't think there's going to be a bunch of, these aren't political parties. It's not like there's going to be an Infantino loyalist who's going to come forward and say, like, I'm going to carry on Gianni's fine work and stuff like that. No, I think what they would like to do is have him resign or remove him somehow, and then get to the elections with, whether it's Sheikh Ahmed, whether it's Victor Montagnani, the president of CONCACAF, whether it's somebody else, have people come forward and say, this is our vision for FIFA, and let's go and vote on it, kind of the way normal organizations are supposed to do.
Yeah, I think to reunite the game, and it's, this is on the back of a good World Cup. We've all been to many World Cups, and this, I have to say, was on a very ground level. The fans, the organisation, we can complain rightly about the ticket prices, the football, but the football was good. It was a good World Cup. But to reunite the game, I think we can't have a UEFA or a European candidate. I think it has to be someone from out with Europe. I think that would be too divisive to have a UEFA candidate, because it would just look like a coup effectively from Europe. And I think if that's Montagliani, he's widely respected. But I think there's a broader issue here: is where are all the leaders, where are all the individuals with moral compasses who can go into these leading sporting bodies? And Joshua, you cover many sports, and I'm sure you've seen it in sports organizations, that there's sometimes really principled individuals go into them and something happens to them, whether it's something in the water in Switzerland. 200 sports organizations are based in Switzerland. It must be for some reason, whether it's legal reasons. Swiss law is particularly labyrinthine and protects them. But there's something about it that when they become presidents and they're mixing with the rich and famous, with wealthy people, with world leaders, it goes to their head. So how you actually find almost like a fit and proper person, Laura McAllister from Wales, former player, has spoken very, very powerfully. But would she actually necessarily want the scrutiny of this job? That is the issue that we have here, is that there are not many obvious candidates who could step in.
So taking a step back for just a moment and assessing the situation, the reaction from UEFA in particular, right? UEFA can't be shocked about Gianni Infantino. He comes from UEFA, right? He's been in charge of FIFA for 10 years. Now, these moves, and you mentioned them, Henry, recently, that have raised eyebrows and more, that have been very upsetting. Why is UEFA rebelling the way that it is? What does it want from FIFA ultimately? What has Infantino done here that is so repellent to UEFA that an apology and the withdrawal of the plan is not going to suffice?
Power, money, politics. And I'll leave it to the other guys to sort of flesh that out. I mean, you look at UEFA, they've expanded the Champions League. There's a broader battle going on between UEFA and FIFA over the amount of games. They see the Club World Cup, UEFA see the Club World Cup as almost like a sort of FIFA land grab onto their clubs. The clubs generate so much interest, so much money. So absolutely, I mean, UEFA can only lecture FIFA only so far. But ultimately, they would argue that it's down to governance, and they just simply don't respect the governance of Infantino's regime.
And if you want to focus on one very small thing, not a small thing, but like a true money point that Henry hinted at there. It's the control of the players. The clubs, the big European clubs, are the ones that pay these astronomical salaries to the players. And every single time they go and they play in a FIFA competition, they're basically on loan from their own clubs. And so the clubs who are at the heart of UEFA really resent the idea that, you know, they're helping FIFA bankroll, or they're bankrolling FIFA's competitions. That FIFA goes and has the most successful World Cup ever, $15 billion. That you know, a healthy chunk of players who are based in Europe, paid by UEFA-based clubs, are out there putting on the show effectively for free.
And risking the health of their assets, these players as well, with these competitions.
Yeah, but there you get something slightly uncomfortable, right, Jerry? You use the word assets, right? What I read from ESPN, I'm barred from referring to players as assets, company style, right? What are we doing here? Is this a business? Is this a sport? Is it somewhere in between? I think there's an understanding. I mean, one of the FIFA vice presidents, who's the head of the Confederation, like saying club football can be capitalism. International football has to be socialism. These two models exist side by side. We're governing the game. If this were just a business, you know, we give invitations to China and India, maybe even my country, Italy, to go to the World Cup. I don't need to see Cape Verde there. Cape Verde doesn't bring any money. And I think that's kind of the line that you're always going to have to walk. In the same way with players, nobody's forcing players to go and play for their national team, by the way, right? They sign contracts with clubs. If the players have a players union, hasn't been anywhere near as powerful as it could be, but you know, the players can say go to the national team and say, I want to focus on the guy who pays my wages, right? Josh is right saying they're on loan, but they're voluntarily going, right?
Gab, that's not going to happen, though, is it? That's not going to happen. The players love playing for their country. England went out to an Argentina team, which, whatever their weaknesses and strength, wow, they wear that shirt like a second skin. Italy, I bumped into Italians out there who were just absolutely heartbroken that they weren't there. International football means so much. Then I'm sorry, apologies, but you know, and you know what? We missed Italy. We missed the players. We missed the team, the fans. We particularly missed your kit. It's always one of the best kits out there. But you know what? Players do care. They really care about it. And you talk to England players, which is kind of my sort of area of interest and expertise in inverted commas, and it hurts. John Stones was a broken man at the end of that tournament, and it means so much. It means more to them. I take your point about the clubs pay them huge amounts, but international football is an honour. They want to deliver at World Cups because it's the one thing that actually unites countries. England stopped in the middle of the night so that people could gather in pubs in the middle of nowhere to watch England.
So if we're talking about such disparate interests, right, from different federations, different confederations, obviously they've got different hopes in terms of who's leading FIFA as a global body and the way they distribute money and perks. So does it still make sense in this world in 2026 for FIFA as it's currently constituted in the way that it divides power, the way that it allocates power? Is it really tenable to keep running the organization the way it does when everybody's got such different interests?
I think not only is it tenable, I think it's necessary. There's an irony in all this. You asked before about, you know, UEFA, and didn't they know Gianni Infantino was like this and whatever. Let's not forget, Gianni Infantino took over or was elected president because a whole slew of FIFA executive board members were arrested or indicted or frog marched out of a fancy 5-star hotel in Zurich. You have to toe this line. You have to keep this balance. And it's not easy, but you have to do it by consensus because it's the right thing to do. The irony in all this is that there was a FIFA reform plan, which was put forward which suggested that maybe the FIFA president should be like a chairman, almost like an honorary position, and the FIFA general secretary should be like a CEO and kind of run the business side, but the president would be in charge. You know who wrote that plan? Victor Montagliani, and more importantly, Gianni Infantino. Then he gets elected president, and he kind of ignores it, and he becomes an executive president, and he centers all the power onto himself. I think the mood around Infantino, I just watches, I don't know, maybe if Josh agrees with me, he watches this stuff pretty closely. I kind of feel that for the first maybe 3 or 4 years of Infantino, people were, okay, you're going to make a lot more money. You've cut down a lot of stealing and corruption. And because despite what his enemies say about him, he really has relative to the previous regime. You're growing the pot. You're giving out this money to everyone, including the little guys. You know, we can make this work. I think what's changed is afterwards, some of the decisions that he made that were even more autocratic than before. You remember he had the SoftBank deal where, you know, when he talked about a biennial World Cup, he decides to go and give the president of the United States a FIFA Peace Prize, which literally nobody had asked for, and nobody even within FIFA knew he was going to do that. A lot of these things have made people really, really uncomfortable with the direction in which he's going. And this is the stuff that kind of put it over the top. It's like, are we going into it in a direction which may possibly be irreversible, right? Because once you start, you know, bringing in outside investors, even in the commercial arm, you're going in a different direction. But to answer your question, I think big business, club football, professional sports, that whole side of it, the commercialized side of it, that has to coexist with the social trust side of it, where everybody gets to play, where the Cook Islands get to enter qualifying and they have a shot at qualifying for the World Cup. That has to stay. Then we can talk about whether, you know, do the Cook Islands, are their incentives going to be misaligned with, say, England or Brazil? Because Cook Islands are thoroughly dependent. Now, I'm not picking on them, but just you can cite one of dozens of tiny FAs who always kind of back whoever sends the most money. And they can say, you know what, we're poor countries. We're not democracies. We don't have elected leaders. Those leaders that Henry was talking about, hey, guess what? You know, we've got an autocratic dictator running us. I'm just happy that I'm getting this money so I can give women, so I can give kids the chance to go and play football, so I can buy kits so that we can participate in local tournaments. Those are their incentives. Those are their objectives. And I think it's good if FIFA can balance that with the needs of high-end professional football. Because
and when
both.
Yeah, and when you talk to these FAs, and this was true 15 years ago when you spoke to them about Sepp Blatter too, they talked about Sepp Blatter the same way they talk about Gianni Infantino, and they don't say he's a great politician. They don't care about his personal life, and they don't care about sort of his feud with Alexander Shefrin at UEFA. What they all say is he is a great humanitarian, and it's a completely different perspective.
But then they've got money there, and also maybe just building on Gab's point is that they actually have an element of means testing. So those countries, Cook Islands, you've mentioned, but there are probably another 50 like them who absolutely are crying out for the money. I don't think the English FA. I mean, we could all do with a few more 3G pitches scattered across the country, but actually we are not in the pressing, there's not that great urgency need for investment in infrastructure in this country. So maybe they balance it out and actually take some of the reserves that they've got, if they're 2 billion in reserves, and actually pass that around the world, but actually give less to the wealthier countries and more to those where the infrastructure, which is
some countries like Norway, Henry, say, you know what, we're a super rich country. We got gas reserves. We got the world's biggest sovereign wealth fund. They don't take the FIFA money. Good. Why don't you ask the English FA, hey, what do you do with the FIFA money? Do you take it? Do you need it?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So I guess ultimately the question, right? And Henry, you think he's gone. He's going to be forced to resign. Josh, do you think that's going to happen?
I think he hangs in there a little longer, and it may have to be the election to get him out.
Gab?
I think this is gonna rumble on until the election, unless the Women's World Cup in September rolls around and teams from Europe, Asia, and North America don't show up. I think they will show up. I think it's going to be some kind of protest, but I think they will show up. If they don't show up, then we could reach a breaking point before that.
I mean, when we're talking about a self-inflicted wound, right, and a miscalculation of immense proportions, right? I mean, it almost makes you say, like, how did a guy who had this position, who managed it so well for so long, he consolidated so much support, he was basically unassailable, miscalculate so badly? Is that just what happens? That, you know what they say about absolute power, right, Henry?
Icarus, he flew too close to the sun. I mean, there's a mixing my mythologies and metaphors here, but there's a Shakespearean element of a man who was sort of blinded by his flaws and brought down by them, by not actually realizing. And maybe there have been one or two people around him who tried to give him good advice, but clearly he hasn't listened. He's been blinded by power, blinded by, as you say, being able to hand out peace prizes, and it's absolutely gone to his head. And I do think if he gets to March, I think he may well win. And that's why I think because of the support that he does have, and that's why I think the pressure will absolutely continue. You saw over the weekend 3 major newspapers across Europe carrying very damaging headlines on an assortment of subject for him. And at some point, the FIFA Council might say, right, 37 of us, my maths is terrible, we need 19 to effectively to ease him out. Or maybe the pressure on his family, and there's a human element to this. He has a wife and 4 children, and we also have to remember that actually we've all got friends who work in other walks of life. Even I've got friends from outside of football, and in their working life, absolutely, how dare you? I mean, they're distant friends, but in their working life, if they'd brought their organization into disrepute, a couple of guys in grey suits would have walked down the corridor with an empty cardboard box and tapped them on the shoulder and said, right, put your yucca plant in here and grab your copies of Gab's latest book, and you're off.
Final thoughts, Gab, Josh?
No, to me, what Henry just touched upon is, I've known the guy for 20 years. Gianni Infantino. Well, Henry too, actually, because we've both been around the block. To me, it's one of the mysteries. This theory that he's somehow gone mad because he's flown too close to the sun is one way to go and explain this. Another theory is that he's got some sort of financial incentive. I don't buy that one because, let's face it, the relative to, say, Roger Goodell, the FIFA president, is not a highly paid position. Relative to some schlemiel in a private equity fund, it's not a highly paid position. He makes between $4 and $5 million a year. When you look at the amount of money he generates, it just doesn't add up, right? So I don't think he's motivated.
Well, so doesn't that mean that would be a motivation for him to make a lot more money?
We know that he talks privately about Roger Goodell all the time.
You can talk about Roger Goodell till the cows come home. We're talking about this. It's a bad model. The NFL is a different animal. But he was just into money. He could leave and become a consultant for the Saudis and make and 10x his salary overnight and do very little work if that's what he wanted to do. So I don't necessarily buy that side of things. And what I really struggle with, and I genuinely don't understand, is I've been around these people, and some of them are cynical, and many of them are politicians, and why? And we've seen them. Look, and I know he took pelters when he was sucking up to Vladimir Putin because the World Cup was in Russia, and you could justify that. And he took pelters with the Emir in Qatar and his friends and his house in Qatar. You could justify that. Look, there's a World Cup in Qatar. I need these guys on board. I need to be nice to them. But I think what happened with the president, who, whether you like him or not, I think everybody would agree, he tends to divide opinion just a little bit between people who like him and people who dislike him. Politically, to be so aligned with one side, even in private conversations that he's had, it's just not the kind of cynical behavior you expect from a scheming politician who wants to make more money or who's self-serving. And that's why I wonder, is there maybe maybe it's Henry. Maybe Henry's right. Maybe it is some mental health issue. Because if it was just a rational, self-serving, wicked genius type of thing, he would realize there's midterms in November. A lot of people don't like this guy. I can kind of dump him because in a couple of years, he's in his 80s. You know, there's a lot of things you could do to kind of reinvent yourself when the power structure in the world's going to look a little different a year or two down the line. He doesn't seem to have made any of those calculations. He's gone in on that, gone in on Josh Kushner and all this other nonsense, and alienated so many people. And I think that's what's really hard for me to square. And I don't have an answer for that. To me, that's one of the big mysteries I hope to find out one day.
Josh, final thoughts.
I think we now have this siege mentality from Infantino where he will pull out all the stops to cling to this role. He had this habit of making unilateral decisions. He was constantly in movement, constantly generating schemes and ideas. And this is the one that bit him. And this is the one that, I think back to The Wire and the opposition.
It always goes back to The Wire.
Always thinking back to The Wire. And the way this opposition has sort of coalesced against him. They know this is their shot. And like they said in The Wire, you come at the king, you best not miss. This is really the moment for them. And they haven't landed the knockout punch so far.
So, Gab, maybe you and I will reunite as we did for that extraordinary FIFA presidential election more than 10 years ago in Zurich. Maybe there will be a repeat of some kind, or maybe not. Gab Marcotti.
Maybe you'll win again.
That's right. Josh Robinson, Henry Winter. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the Sports Reporters and lending us your thoughts and expertise on the subject of Gianni Infantino and his FIFA.